Hello, welcome to Civic Affairs. I'm Andy Martens. I'm delighted to welcome Tara Maskevich, Region 6 Vice President of OPSEUA. 2,200 members, 16,000 in Region 6, and we welcome all the viewers in Sudbury, Timmins, and North Bay that have joined us. Tara and I are in Sault Ste. Marie, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andy, for having me on the show.
Wonderful. Let's begin with this. Your brief background on how you got involved with OPSEUA, and to this day, you're the Vice President at this point.
So it's actually kind of a bit of a unique story compared to some people who have been labor activists for a long time. I got involved through organizing at my workplace. So unlike some most folks that join a union, they usually inherit it with their job, right? In our case, we actually went through what we thought were the most appropriate unions and the best fit for our members, and we ended up deciding that OPSEUA was a good fit for us. So we actually chose our union, which is a little bit different than you usually see in workplaces, and that happened actually in 2013 is when we actually organized. So it's been a pretty busy 5.5 years for me.
Wonderful, and you're actually an employee of Algoma Family Services, and we give the wonderful employees of Algoma Family Services a shout out. And your employer is flexible. You're doing such an important job overseeing the region that you have the flexibility that other people may not have.
Yeah, the unions will negotiate that. We negotiate in our collective agreements. So when executive board members are voted in, we get an opportunity to actually do the job, because it's important work that the board does through the region, well, through the province, really.
You wanted to talk right off the top. There's an important event coming up in Sault Ste. Marie on April 3rd, the OFL event. Can you let our viewers know what that's going to involve?
So the Ontario Federation of Labour is doing Power of Many, it's called. Right. It's a regional activation meeting, and it's going to be on April 3rd, as you mentioned, 5:30 to 8:30 in the OPSEUA membership room, 159 Great Northern Road.
Right.
We're asking that people sign up through the Ontario Federation of Labour, or OFL website. They can directly sign up for that event, so we know how many folks are going to be out for it. And our hope is that it is a combination of unions and also community activists. Mm-hmm. We really want to bring together people and have some really serious conversations about how we can promote individual rights and how we can work to make sure that this provincial government listens to us and does what we want them to do as far as take care of our families, our children, that sort of thing.
Do you think that there's still things are falling through the cracks and it's still not enough at this point?
I think there's a few things. One is I'm concerned about the cuts that have been happening. We don't have a budget, but we have cuts that are happening, and I'm not clear on that there's a plan on those cuts. For instance, I mean, the most recent was to autism funding, right? So we're not really clear on how these things are rolling out. And the other part of it is, I really think we have a revenue problem in Ontario. We don't have a spending problem. That's what the government is trying to tell us, that we have a spending problem. Right. But what I'm seeing is we have a revenue problem. When we're giving away the revenue of, for instance, the LCBO to private sales, cannabis sales to private retailers, that's revenue that could and should, in my opinion, go into our hospitals, into our elderly care, into our treatment programs. Those are all pieces that we should be doing, and instead what the government's doing is actually reducing its own revenue, which to me doesn't make any sense.
How is that compared to what the Liberal government was doing prior to Doug Ford?
Well, the Liberal government was privatizing, right?
They
were doing it as well. However, we had a commitment from the Liberal government to at least keep a portion of the cannabis sales to be public. So they were trying what they were considering a balanced portfolio. I think that it should all be public because it doesn't change the prices. Like when I've been out at rallies, at LCBO rallies, and pushing for people to keep the LCBO public, people are like, well, but the price, I want the price of alcohol to go down. Well, that's regulated by the province. That doesn't change no matter where it's sold. So they're not going to get a sale, if you will. That's going to happen provincially. So the only difference is when you purchase alcohol products at the LCBO, that money goes directly back, the profits go directly back into our infrastructure in Ontario. So our education, our healthcare, that sort of thing. When you purchase it at a private retailer, it goes to the private retailer as profit.
Which way do you think the province should have gone? Did they do the right thing with cannabis, or?
I don't think they did.
Okay.
I think that we should have had it public. We still have access issues with it. All those things wouldn't change. The difference is when you purchase those products, then it would be helping out at least some of the infrastructure in the province. And particularly when the Liberal government proposed legalization of cannabis, one of the things they talked about was the sales of the cannabis, the profits, would be able to offset things like policing and addictions issues, right? Like, so far, we don't see any of that changing. We have no new addictions funding coming in, although we have the potential for more issues.
Right.
So it doesn't seem to make sense that we're giving away, we're giving away the cow, really, is what
I
we're doing.
agree. What's your greatest thrill right now as being Vice President of Region 6 of OPSEUA?
I really, one of my favorite passion things, I have a couple, but one of my favorite things actually is working with women, and particularly women's workplaces. When I have an opportunity to go in and really educate members around what the union can do and their rights, and work with them to deal with issues in their in their workplace, it's really rewarding for me to see that. I mean, I understand it. I have a majority women in the workplace at Algoma Family Services, and so it's really been a passion. The other part of that is, it sort of stems from that, is our equity groups. I really like working with equity, and in OPSEUA we have a number of equity groups, and I really enjoy the opportunity to go out for Pride events, for instance, and to learn about the different challenges and also celebrations that happen within our equity folks.
Well, I think it's great to broaden your spectrum, political spectrum, and that's what I want to do. And it's wonderful that the things that you've been able to accomplish, and it's one protest at a time, but it needs to be done. Let's take a quick break, Tara, and we'll be right back with Tara Maskajewicz on Civic Affairs. We'll be right back. Hello, welcome back to Civic Affairs. We're having a delightful conversation with Tara Maskajewicz, who's the Vice President of OPSEUA Region 6, and we have the viewers with the entire region, I'm sure, watching our broadcast. Tara, how are things in the region in Sudbury, Timmins, and North Bay compared to Sault Ste. Marie?
Well, I think we were looking at, in general, we're concerned about jobs with the public service, that with the cuts that have been happening, with not replacing positions with the Ontario Public Service. We know that the broader public service, so our transfer payment agencies, like Algoma Family Services would be one, for instance, but in general, that's been commentary by the provincial government. So we're concerned about how they want to reduce costs in those areas, given a lot of them have been on a shoestring budget to begin with, right? If we look at the differences, I think, when I'm in Timmins or when I'm in Sudbury, there's a sense that there is an ability to speak with their MPPs. And in general, I mean, they're NDP MPPs, so they have, as the opposition, they have a little bit different job and role, right? So they feel that they have a little bit more access, where it's a bit more difficult in North Bay and Sault Ste. Marie to be able to do that. So we have a different sense. I was at Timmins, the pre-budget hearing consultations, and we did a rally, and the Charlie Angus, NDP MP, spoke at the rally. Gilles Bisson, NDP MPP, spoke at the rally. I mean, those are things that really help people understand what's happening in the budget consultations versus that would be less likely to happen in Sault Ste. Marie or North Bay because we have PC MPPs. So, it would be seen probably as more adversarial, although we're trying to do the same job, right? We're still trying to get the public
Right.
aware of what's going on with
Well,
the budget
we
consultations.
did come close, 400 and change votes here in Sault Ste. Marie. So we, I remember that night very well. I was in this building and it wasn't that far away, here. But nevertheless, we'll have to deal with that.
Well, and I was going to say, Mr. Romano is our MPP, so
Right.
we have a shared interest.
Exactly.
You, myself,
We do.
Mr. Romano, we all want what's best for the city, for the
That's
people that
right.
live in this city. I mean, so it's really engaging our MPPs at
Yeah.
that level. It doesn't have to be headbutting adversarial work. I mean, we think of rallies for unions.
Right.
It can be about educating public, and it can be about showing what we prefer to have happen in our province versus a real
Right.
nasty or difficult or ugly situation.
And you
right?
see that engagement in not in North Bay, but in Sudbury and
Yeah.
Timmins. You see what the other end of the spectrum looks like when MPPs and MPs, for that matter, may engage as well.
Yep.
People have asked me, are really unions really needed in 2019? Well, I can tell you firsthand, I've seen situations over the last 10 years. You and I talked about it before the broadcast. Unions are needed and more now than they were before, and they're still needed in 2019.
Well, absolutely. I think if we look at, for instance, we're going to talk about women's issues. If we look at harassment, discrimination in workplaces, it's still occurring in some workplaces, right? And so what unions can do is support their members in fighting some
Right.
of that. If you're on your own and you're dealing with something, and this is something we talked about earlier, you're on your own and you're dealing with it, it's your money, your risk of your job. With the union, you have some support and you have some guidance. The other thing you need to do is educate people on their rights. A lot of people don't know their rights in the workplace. And by having that education, they're able to say, hey, this isn't okay, or I don't have to do this, or this is unsafe work for me. But
Right.
without that, it can be a very complicated place to be, right?
Do you find people are kind of hesitant somewhat in companies to stand up and be a union steward in some cases?
I think in some cases that's true.
They're worried the employer may have repercussions of
Yeah.
some sort.
Yeah, and we've heard that, especially when we have new stewards coming out or a new unit or local forming, and they're like, well, we might have this. And how we explain it is that stewards, as long as they're acting as a steward,
Right.
has a higher sense of protection under the Labor Act in that sense if they're acting in good faith as a steward. So they are actually getting a little more protection than they would if they were a regular member. So we do encourage, for instance, one of the units that I worked with that after they organized, every person in the entire unit became a steward on purpose. That was not only a show of solidarity for them, but it also gave management the message that we will all stand up. We will all speak up.
Is there anything OPSEU can do to calm the fears of employees that feel like they want to do and be a union steward, but they're just not quite ready for it?
Oh yeah, this is work our local leadership does all the time.
Right.
So our local presidents meet with members and explain situations to them, and sometimes the executive board members are invited to those meetings or different meetings, so we can also explain our own experiences, as stewards in working on rights as well. There tends to be a fear that, again, that there isn't a shared interest with your employer, but bottom line is happy employees is usually a goal for an employer as well. They don't want to have unhealthy or unhappy members or employees.
If anybody's watching, viewers, companies across Northern Ontario, and they may look at OPSEU, what can you tell them that why OPSEU? Because again, you and I have talked about sometimes a company and employees want to unionize, but you pick the wrong union, things can go wrong.
Well, I think it's important to look at a fit when you're looking at it, when a group is considering unionizing. I mean, we're not set up like Amway. I'm not getting a trip if somebody joins OPSEU.
Exactly,
That's never our goal.
That's right.
And there's risks involved to a not good fit, right? And OPSEU is a public service employees union. That's what
Right.
we are. So that's where we're best, right? We have a lot of broader public service, so a lot of transfer payment to agencies like my agency. That's the fastest growing component basically in OPSEU. the fit for us was very clear because two parts. One is we had counterparts through the province that were OPSEU already. So when I go to a child treatment sector division meeting, for instance, I can communicate with all these people throughout the province that are dealing with the same issues I'm dealing with. They're dealing literally with the same computer systems.
Right.
And so we know what's coming right down the line, and we know, and we can say to our employer, hey, we heard this about it, but let's work to fix it before it happens.
Right.
So we've got that communication. If we're dealing with, say, another group that were, I don't know, food and beverage handlers, I'll just use in general.
You kind of get your message to that group.
Then that may not be the best fit for those folks. And our organizing, if they approached our organizing people, they would help them find what might be a better fit for them. The other part for OPSEU that is a bit different is we have a very high emphasis on social justice. I mean, that's some of the conversations we've had, right? Is about our passion, our shared passion about social justice and those pieces. And that was a real draw because after a workplace organizes, then what?
Yeah, exactly.
You work really hard. Whatever the issues were, get settled out. Everybody's coming along, and everybody's feeling good about being at work. Then what happens? How do you keep your members engaged? And, especially if you look at, say, social services.
Right.
We're advocates for our clients. We're advocates in the community. We're passionate about social justice issues, variety of them. So it was a really good fit for us, where it might not be for a different group.
Right.
So you really want to be looking at those pieces. You want to look at dues. You want to look at the structure of the union, if it's a good fit for you and your employer or not.
Right. Great. Wonderful, Tara. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back with Tara Maskahevich after these commercial breaks.
Okay, over time.
Hi, welcome back to Civic Affairs. We're having a delightful conversation with Tara Maskahevich, who is the Vice President of Region 6 in OPSEU. Tara, it's been a great show. Let's keep it going. Women's safety in the workplace, women's rights, my favorite topic. Let me say to you publicly, I think yourself and Ashley Gapp and others did a wonderful job with that rally in Sault Ste. Marie, January 19th.
Thank you very much.
Can you give us some background what brought that on, why it was needed? I know why it was needed, but for our viewers.
There have been rallies in the past in the Sioux, but it hasn't been consistent. And actually last year, Ashley and I went to Sudbury and did the Women's March there with, actually Andrew Horvath did it in Sudbury as well. And we were in contact with the organizers for Sudbury, again this year with plans to go, and then kind of came up, Michelle McLeave had said, hey, it would be great if we did something here a week and a half out. So we kind of, we rushed a little bit, but we managed with some great people like Barbara Day, who they did drumming, the drumming group, and did the treaty acknowledgement, and then we had Shabby Motley come on board and provided beverages for people because it was really, really cold. And Algoma Family Services gave us space to do a sign lunch one day. So we kind of had everybody kind of chip in, and community members, and got it done. And
it wasn't 70 degrees and sunny that day either.
No, it was really cold.
Do you plan to do a follow-up this year at any time? Because you can count on me being at a rally if you do. Was there going to be a follow-up anytime soon? We're
looking at what we're going to be doing over the next year, actually. We're not 100% sure yet. There's been some talk of changing dates around to warmer time period, that sort of thing. So we'll keep you posted, though.
Can you talk about the women's safety in the workplace is one, women's safety at home? There really is a myriad of issues that need to be dealt with here.
I think if we boil it down to violence against women in general, and targeting, and what kinds of things happen in our society that either make people think differently of that or enforce it. And that's sort of a bigger piece. I don't think we can probably even get into the tip of the iceberg on that. But the bottom line is that shifting change needs to happen. And unfortunately, we've had, which started the original Women's March in 2017, was a shift down south where all this stuff was happening, and there were huge problems with that president's language and things that people were very...
Oh, it was terrible.
Yep.
And we were talking about our prime minister has been slipping a little bit with women too. It started out sunny and nice, but the weather is getting cloudy three or 4 years later.
Yeah, I think we need to be looking at the bigger picture of what actually comes out of these situations. And you know, I asked an American professor at Harvard that was teaching at one of our components, and I just said to her, what do you see, like, how do you feel about the states and what's going on? And she said, actually very optimistic, because when you see these rallies and you see these protests, you see young people out. You see new activists, you see people that are now getting engaged in politics at a level they never have before. And I think that part of it is the optimism, is engaging people in our communities at that level so that they can educate themselves and other people.
Where we saw the women's rights, and you were involved with it personally, if you can speak briefly about the Owen Sound incident last year, and a day before my birthday, no less, on August 24th, 2018. That was a perfect example of why women's rights need to be brought up.
Absolutely. So the Owen Sound strike was a medical center that had, it started out with 30 women that ended up on strike with an employer that really was refusing to bargain, which we've seen time and time again. And this particular employer was very vitriolic when they were crossing the picket line. They were using language that I mean, I couldn't possibly even spell on TV, let alone say. It was horrific. There was homophobic slurs by the security guards while we were out on the picket line, and then and there was a lot of violence. The community couldn't understand what was going on, or wouldn't understand, weren't supportive. They were listening to the publicity from this employer, and were very aggressive. Ended up the one day that you're referring to, that I had my foot run over. Yeah,
she took it on the chin, folks. She got her foot run over, literally.
There were 7 people that were hit on that picket line that day. So it wasn't an isolated incident. It didn't stay an isolated incident. The next morning, more people were hit. There was another executive board member a few days later who had his foot run over. He has better bones than I do.
Did the police in Owen Sound lay charges on this? Or?
No, they found they didn't have enough evidence to lay charges. So.
Thank goodness Owen Sound is not part of Region 6.
No, that would kind of, no. I mean, I'm sure there's some lovely people there, but there are some pretty angry folks.
In our remaining minutes, I've got about a minute. What is your biggest challenge as Vice President, briefly, in Region 6?
I think the biggest thing for us is the region itself. Talking about how much time it takes to travel and get to Timmins and North Bay, and that's not even including, we have members in Moosonee as well.
Wow.
So trying to get everybody communicating, because that's what unions are about. We're organizers, right?
Yeah.
So the more our members have that contact, that information, the more we can organize. So we just spent a lot of time investing in updated AV equipment for our membership rooms, so that we can really connect our members throughout the region. And so we're excited about that. That's hopefully going to help us out a lot, because we're on the road. The 3 executive board members, myself, J.L. Roy, and Ken Steinbrenner, we're on the road a lot. And
it'd be easier if you had your own plane.
Yeah, well, the Premier's plane's in the M&R hangar, but I don't get to use it.
Tara, you've been an absolute delightful guest. I've enjoyed every minute of this. Thank you so much, and we'll have you back again. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much, Andy.
That's Tara Maskahevich. She's the Vice President of Region 6 of OPSEUA, and that's another edition of Civic Affairs. I'm Andy Martens. We'll see you next time.